Pastor Ramesh Ponnuru, senior editor at said National Review, may have been part of that interview actually way back when, and Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief at USA Today. You know, Ramesh, I will start with you since it's your publication that did that interview. It strikes me today that some of these Republicans that are in the House apparently forgot why they lost it before, because that's what made this, to me, so head-scratching in the first place. And it's like, where was Eric Cantor's sentiment yesterday when this was happening?
Well, there's been a lot of turnover among House Republicans.
Including Eric Cantor, I say.
Including Eric Cantor, that's right. And it would be interesting to see a breakdown between the older members and the newer members on this vote. But I think there's no question that this was politically a colossal blunder, just a terrible way to start off the new year. And if Trump hadn't intervened, one wonders whether they would have had the sense to pull back.
Now, Trump didn't say he was for this office. He just said, what are you prioritizing here? But it was actually a more effective shaming, I think.
Politically, and I'm glad you showed that, because I remember I was in the meetings going into 2000 election when we rolled out, you might remember this, Chuck, a culture of corruption.
Yes, it was that was the 06 campaign.
That was, and by the way, it was a lot of fighting to have Democrats land on that, and we finally landed on that. And what we did over time was Republicans had two big advantages. They had over security as well as values, right? And over the culture of corruption, we undermined that big gap they had in middle America around values and doing the right thing. And this sort of spoke to me exactly the same problem, this fundamental overstep, that if Republicans aren't seen as a values sort of centered party in middle America, church-going America, it's a real problem for them. This was a colossal mistake.
And Susan, what's interesting here, and this is where Trump, to quote Chris Matthews, he likes to say this, he's got the best ear in politics. He's not stupid. He knew where this was headed, and he basically, you could argue it probably gets repealed anyway, that they were getting a lot of grief. Perhaps at some point, and he decided, I know how to make it happen today.
That's right, or at least I know how to appear to make it happen.
That's right.
Because of me. Because, you know, members of Congress were also getting a lot of calls from constituents saying, what in the world are you doing? You know, it's not just a political mistake. It goes to, why do they think they were sent here? You know,
and that goes to my question. What was the message to the voters, right?
That's right. So in secret, on an issue that no one ever talked about during this entire campaign, they choose to do that first.
You know, the other thing is, and I'm not one who is quick to praise President-elect Trump, but it was also deft, because the careful, gentle way in which he did it. He didn't say you guys are being corrupt, being crooked. He said, basically, stop and take a second. Is this really the way you want to start things off?
You know, two things. One was
it was actually a very mature way of handling it.
Smart. It was subtle.
Very subtle.
Not usually the adjective we use with Donald Trump's tweets. You know, not only were they willing to listen to him, he was willing to give them a hard time in a public way. He didn't like call the leader and say quietly, please, you've got to get out of this. This is a bad idea. He did it in public, and that tells you something about how this town is likely to operate for the next 2 years with this Republican.
This was a new sheriff in town. It's a small moment, but it's a new sheriff in town moment.
But it showed us also sort of who, and again, I'm not even being partisan here, but in fact, who Congress is. Look, 8% of Americans think that members of Congress are highly ethical, according to Gallup poll.
There is bipartisan agreement on one thing. You think all these guys are corrupt.
All these guys are corrupt, and you feed into that narrative when your first thing you do is scratch this office.
And let me paint another scenario. Donald Trump's got his own conflicts of interest issues that people, that Democrats certainly believe is going to trip him up at some point. The question's always been, how are House Republicans going to handle those issues when they have to do this? Congress, we've heard from a lot of congressional Republicans who say they're going to hold him accountable personally on this stuff. Haven't they undermined that effort big time with what their mess today?
Is it ironic? I mean, is it possible that congressional Republicans thought they could do this because of Donald Trump? Because Donald Trump
what I'm wondering.
Has not released his taxes. He's not going to.
And none of it's hurt him.
That the public doesn't care about these things.
The public doesn't care, so we might as well do it as well.
And that's, I guess they got a message today that, well, the public actually still cares.
I do think that these things, they matter if they're added to other things. If there's a perception that the Republicans are more interested in their own personal advancement than they're in doing anything good for the country.
That's what today looked like.
And that's what happened in 05 and 06 also.
And that's what Democrats have to take advantage of. I mean, this whole idea that they're corrupt and they're for special interests, if Democrats can roll that into the next midterm election, I think they'll be successful.
Well. Day one of...
Day one, I'm already starting.
There it is. All right, guys. Stick around. Coming up, the big challenges facing both parties in the new year. What will Republicans really do about health care in between repealing it?